Hello and welcome to session 271 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing the second part of Quentin Pope's Objections to We're All Gonna Die by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Quentin Pope, we talked about who they were last time, so I'll just say this is the second half. The first part is about the security mindset. The security mindset is something that Eliezer Yudkowsky has talked about in several parts of his the recording that we are going through. Quentin Pope summarizes Eliezer's point as follows: "A bundle of intuitions acquired from the field of computer security are a good predictor for the difficulty and value of future alignment research directions." I'm not entirely sure this is in fact a good summary of Eliezer's view. Like, the intuitions don't really predict the difficulty or the value of the research directions. I think I would rather summarize it as security mindset is a mindset where you guard against errors in your own reasoning. But of course, a big part of Eliezer's point is that it can't really be summarized to something simple like that. Quentin Pope's argument is that most things are not like security. And that is, of course, true if you use the outside view. But in this topic, we're talking about AI safety and safety against intelligent adversaries, and that is, in fact, very much like security. So, in that on that surface level, alignment and security seems to be closely related. Machine learning is unlike security, and also unlike rocketry. And that is, of course, very, very true. But I think Eliezer is comparing alignment to security and not machine learning to security. The difference, according to Quentin Pope, is that in alignment, there isn't an adversarial intelligence trying to find flaws. And part of the classic AI safety superintelligence argument is that there may, in fact, be an opposed intelligence, superintelligence, trying to find flaws in your security scheme. I think on a more meta level, you could argue that the optimization pressures that you find in things like reinforcement learning from human feedback is a kind of adversarial intelligence that's trying to find flaws. Next topic is grizzled old cynics, which Eliezer Yudkowsky claims are more likely to have a realistic picture of the difficulties of alignment, and Quentin Pope disagrees, saying that these cynics have often been wrong. I think, of course, they've been wrong, right? That's part of the definition. But also, like, are they wrong more often than non-grizzled young idealists, if that's like the opposite? I think, in fact, that these veterans are right more often. I think that you gain some wisdom in a field by working on it. Like, I'm obviously biased on this. One of the examples that Quentin Pope points out is that Yudkowsky previously dismissed a brain-based analogy for why AIs would be intelligent. So I did, in fact, look this up. First, it was in 2008, and talking about the current AIs. And of course, on the object level, the AIs that that Eliezer was criticizing did not, in fact, turn out to be very useful for much of anything. And his reasoning that you need to have some kind of deeper knowledge, and you can't just take like a random element of the brain and then model that really carefully, and then you'll get something that is like the brain. I think that is a really poor way to argue for the probability of success of your system. Like, for instance, right now we in 2023 we know that one of the key things that was required for neural networks to be intelligent is that they needed to be deployed at scale, and people really didn't understand that on the same level in 2008. And I think if you try to build a neural network and try to make it intelligent, and you try to make it brain-like, but you don't have the insight that this scaling is actually really, really important, then I'm confident that you can't make anything like a brain. So I think the argument, in fact, does hold up. The second claim I find is rather extreme. There is no reason, according to Quentin Pope, to think that Eliezer Yudkowsky is well calibrated about the difficulty of alignment research. I think no one is really well calibrated. It's just a really difficult field, and I feel Eliezer Yudkowsky is quite open about this. I think he has done. I think I would consider him to be the person in the world who has done most alignment research and best alignment research. So on both of these dimensions, he is the person you would expect. I think reasonable people can disagree with this, but I think no reason at all, as Quentin, that's kind of like a low bar. I think it's very obvious that he has at least done something. And finally, Quentin repeats one of the things we talked about last time, that alignment is more like machine learning. And I think that is, in fact, very much the fundamental disagreement. I don't see a good way to progress on this. Like, there is the sense, like, there's a caricature of machine learning where you just take some trivial linear algebra and then you just mix the pile together, like in the XKCD comic, and alignment seems to be very much like not like that. But I don't really have a formal and structured way to say that. What does it mean to be wrong about alignment? Eliezer Yudkowsky has this text about building a rocket and what it means if you are wrong when you build a rocket, and Quentin Pope has a difficult time interpreting this. He, when he talks about the rocket, the two theories he had about what Eliezer Yudkowsky means is he's talking about either his own argument or what would be alignment optimists building AGI. What is the rocket in this analogy? Vaniver in the comments says that this is Eliezer Yudkowsky building alignment. I think I would actually disagree with him and say it is about alignment optimists building AGI. I think the quote, there's a missing section break in the quote that Quentin Pope is taking from the transcripts, and I think that makes it slightly more clear that we are talking about alignment optimists and not the thing that was talked about in the previous section. And Quentin Pope, once he engages with Vaniver here, like, there's no real objection here, but there is a lot of talk about why it would be a stupid thing to have the rocket in this analogy be Yudkowsky's argument. Like, if there's a problem with your argument, then it's more likely to be wrong, and I totally agree with that. It's just sad to see that we're getting so sidetracked on this part of the debate. Eliezer Yudkowsky talks about generality on, for instance, AlphaZero that wasn't really very specialized for Go, and Quentin Pope is talking about what does that mean for the progress rates. And I think they're somewhat talking past each other at this point, in that Yudkowsky is talking about like generality, how general these algorithms will be, and Quentin Pope about like what will be the progress rates. Both are of course interesting topics, but it seems somewhat distinct. The reason I want to go a bit deeper into here is that Quentin Pope has an interesting counter-argument, and that is that Go is very different from scientific research. Scientific research seems to be substantially harder than Go. And that is true, but I would point out here that scientific research is one of Bostrom's 6 cognitive superpowers, and in order to show that there will be a slow rate of progress, it's not enough to just pick one possible task, one strategic task, and say that seems hard. In order to show that progress will be slow, then you need to look at the best of those and prove that they are all hard. The argument that Quentin Pope uses to say that scientific research is going to be hard for an AI is that there is no way to get millions of demonstrations of research. I think that is not true. I think Archive would be an example of basically a couple of million demonstrations. He also says that there's no way to score research. I think that there's always citation counts, A index, and I think in particular if you do something more fine-grained, like what facts and insights are in fact cited across this, then you can probably do a lot. So this isn't really my central objection to Quentin Pope's arguments, but this is the kind of blue-eyed reasoning that Eliezer Yudkowsky objects to, and that Quentin Pope says is actually not blue-eyed. And I think it is in fact naive, in that here Quentin Pope is pointing out this part seems hard, and the reason it is hard is because he is imagining some obstacles that a more cynical person would say probably OpenAI would find a way around these obstacles, and I think there are ways around this obstacle, and putting our hopes for safety into the assumption that there is no way to get millions of demonstrations of research is foolhardy. Next is some discussion about self-improving. Again, this is kind of very much a distraction to my part. Eliezer Yudkowsky says that AlphaGo does not become smarter, and Quentin says obviously becomes smarter, right? Because it becomes better at Go, and I think Yudkowsky obviously means that. So maybe he means something like in general intelligent, and I thought, yeah, and that's also something that I think Quentin Pope would agree with to some extent. Like meta-learning seems to be a thing, but Eliezer Yudkowsky in the comments says that actually what he meant with this sentence was just a very, very narrow claim that it does not become smarter as you run it. So in inference mode rather than in training mode. I must admit, when I read Yudkowsky's transcript, that didn't jump out to me. I thought I misunderstood it in the same way as Quentin did, and that's a problem with transcripts and podcasts. It's hard to be so clear that every single word cannot be misinterpreted. Okay, so what about this? Humans, they train and run at the same time, and the AIs, it's actually not very hard to do online learning. Of course, from a technical point of view, it's almost trivial to just also do some kind of online learning. People generally don't do it because it doesn't help very much. It makes things more complex, and it doesn't really help. And the comment that I would definitely echo here is that humans and AIs work in different ways, and this kind of online learning that is absolutely central to human learning doesn't seem to be central to AIs at all. I also think that when I looked at Eliezer Yudkowsky's talk about AI's self-improvement, then the thing I'm thinking about when I think about AI's recursively self-improving is an AI that is rewriting its own source code. That's to me the classical example of recursive self-improvement. And I think Eliezer Yudkowsky should have talked about that instead of talking about this rather trivial limitation on some of these AI systems. Next, on breaking things and cryptography, where Eliezer Yudkowsky has this quote: "Breaking existing cryptographical systems is how we learn who the real experts are in cryptography." And Quentin Pope objects to this, saying that alignment really isn't like this, because we don't have a signal that is as obvious as, breaking a new algorithm, a cryptographic algorithm, and discovering secrets and something like that. I don't think this is actually what Eliezer Yudkowsky was talking about. He was answering a question: what should a person listening to this episode do? And of course, this is I think Bankless is a crypto. I don't actually know what they are. They are somewhere in the crypto sphere. And so the people who are listening to this episode are probably people who know quite a bit about cryptography. And that is why I think Eliezer Yudkowsky tries to make an analogy with cryptography, even though it's not really meant to carry a lot of weight. And he is very upfront that he does not, in fact, have really good answers to the question of what a person listening to this episode should do. He is like saying maybe some of the people who are doing things with AI that is kind of like breaking the AI by doing like interesting prompt hacking, prompt injection things. Maybe they could understand something about this system in the same way that people attacking or not trying to understand cryptographic protocols are doing. And I think that's a more reasonable argument. Quentin objects that prompt hacking doesn't really point to any irreconcilable flaws with the current alignment schemes. I think I generally agree with this, but I also don't think this was what Eliezer Yudkowsky was talking about at all. So, in conclusion, what are my central objections to Quentin Pope's post? I think on the meta level, it would have been way better if Quentin Pope did not reply to a podcast, but to some kind of more formal written work. Of course, it doesn't get really formal when it's Eliezer Yudkowsky, but podcasts are really informal. And this ties into the problem that at many times we see Quentin Pope talk at length about things that I think Eliezer Yudkowsky would say are not really relevant at all, and also some of the relevant things are just not discussed. There is a number of comments to this post made by Vannevar in particular that seemed like they could bring the discussion forward substantially, and Quentin Pope have answered a few of them, but most of them he have not answered. And I think on the meta level, that would definitely be the way forward to answer those. Now on the object level, one of the things that I think is most relevant is that the alignment of humans is insufficient. Like Quentin openly admits that there's a 5% probability that we will get a catastrophe, and that is really bad. And trying to do the same thing as humans is not good enough. Like we need to do something that is better than that. Humans are not safe. Humans are not corrigible. And if we try to make an AI that is kind of like humans, then we may have the same kind of problems that we have with humans. The second part is the fundamental difference between the large language models we are seeing right now and humans, in particular how these obtain values and how they learn. I think they are really, really different. I don't see any kind of experiments I could see that Quentin and I would disagree on. So I have a hard time figuring out how we can progress on this, but I'm open to suggestions. That is all I have for today. Thank you and see you next time.